Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking, and this week I'm looking at the 2015 visual novel / courtroom drama, The Great Ace Attorney Adventures, a prequel spin-off in the Ace Attorney series created by Capcom. More specifically, the enhanced and localized version released alongside its sequel on the Nintendo Switch on July 27, 2021 in the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. This game is set in the early 20th century and follows an ancestor of the legal eagle we all know and love. Did the Ace Attorney learn from the best, or did his lineage start at the bottom? Let's answer that question as we give it everything we've got. The game opens with the first look at our protagonist, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. He's about to be on trial for the murder of a visiting Englishman named John H. Wilson. He's going to be defended by his best friend and ace lawyer, Kazuma Asogi. However, thanks to some chicanery
we do a little trolling
from this Omni-Man looking motherfucker, Ryunosuke ends up being his own attorney despite having no actual experience. With Kazuma by your side, you eventually reveal your innocence and the true culprit by presenting evidence and dissecting witness testimony, building confidence along the way. This trial is hard to get through at times, as several key pieces of information are blatantly obvious, but you have to spin your wheels for another hour before the characters can figure out what you've already known for ages. I get that it's essentially the tutorial trial, but I would have liked it to be faster. But with Kazuma by your side, you are unstoppable, and you both set off on a long boat ride to London. In Chapter 2, though, things really begin to feel different. Chapter 2 opens with Ryunosuke being accused of murder. Wait. This doesn't feel very different. However, the victim this time around is Kazuma Asogi. Huh. Well, that sucks. Since this chapter and the following one are when we meet all of the important supporting characters, I may as well just introduce them now. Your loyal judicial assistant, wise beyond her years, who has no problem throwing you across the room with little to no reason for doing so, but still supportive to the end, Susato Mikotoba! The ultimate detective / genius and master of deductions that are only kind of right so that you can swoop in and pick up his slack, who really borders the line between being funny and being annoying, Herlock Sholmes! Yes, I'm serious. Herlock Sholmes' adopted daughter, who is also a genius in her own right, and the mind behind strange inventions like a smoke bomb gun and a cat flap maker, and the author of the popular Herlock Sholmes stories, Iris Wilson! Iris is also the daughter of John Wilson, Herlock's original assistant, so yes, this game opens with the death of John Watson. Thanks, game. The detective inspector from Scotland Yard who loves himself some fish and chips, so much so that he constantly has them on his person no matter where he is or what he's doing, which can't be healthy, Inspector Gregson! And the lower class thief who has to steal to survive, and definitely the best character in this game, Gina Lestrade! Lestrading back to where we were, Chapter 2 doesn't actually have a trial. It is solely dedicated to the investigation section. You go back and forth between like 3 different locations on this large boat to piece together what actually happened to Kazuma with help from Susato and Herlock. You eventually find out what actually happened and are cleared of all charges. However, since you were a stowaway on the boat, you decide to dedicate yourself to studying law for the remainder of the boat ride, taking Kazuma's spot as the lawyer on the voyage, and Susato becomes your assistant. It was a pretty bold move to have the first 2 chapters of a 5-chapter game dedicated to setting up the main character and explaining how he became a lawyer, but it paid off. We knew Ryunosuke would eventually become a lawyer, but they made the journey there fun and interesting. Although the way Kazuma died was actually pretty weak.
My entire life has been a waste.
Chapter 3 picks up a few weeks later, right as Ryunosuke and Susato arrive in London. They are immediately thrust into defending this man, Magnus McGilded, a rich penguin-looking Irishman accused of murdering someone. Ryunosuke has to get a not guilty verdict for McGilded in order to become an official lawyer. Why? I don't know. Just like Chapter 1, this entire chapter is dedicated to a trial. You must piece together everything during the trial and figure things out as you go. And I'm pretty sure that's how real court works.
Why do you think they call me Juice?
However, a new wrinkle is introduced, the jury. Much like actual court, the main goal of the prosecution and the defense is to convince the jury of the accused's innocence or guilt, so you have to manage them as well. This chapter is our introduction to Gina Lestrade, as she ends up being one of the witnesses attesting to McGilded's innocence. The trial is less obvious than the first one, but it's still very long and definitely drags at times. Eventually, McGilded is found not guilty, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and Ryunosuke doesn't quite believe he did the right thing. But he has no time to ask McGilded because he fucking burns to death minutes later, Jesus Christ! Despite what you would think, Chapter 4 is not about McGilded's death. It's about the completely unrelated attempted murder of Miss Green. Your defendant this time around is the very real author, Sosuke Natsume, and this is by far the worst chapter in the game. It was interesting to see an attempted murder, since every other case ever in these games is just straight up murder, but that's where the positives end. Every character important to this chapter is members annoying, from the defendant to each member of the jury to the witnesses and the culprits. This is also the first chapter to have both investigation and trial sections, but the investigation ends up being largely unimportant as all of the important revelations happen in the trial itself. Anyway, you eventually clear Natsume's name and we move full speed into the 5th and final chapter. The defendant this time around is the returning Gina Lestrade, who has made friends with Iris since we last saw her and is accused of murdering a pawnbroker after breaking in an attempt to retrieve the Herlock Sholmes story that Herlock had locked away and said no one could read. What story is that, you ask? Why, it's The Hound of the Baskervilles, one of the most important and famous Sherlock Holmes stories ever, no big deal.
Okay.
Sorry, what?
What's its importance to this case, though?
What is not a damn thing?
It's mostly just a plot device to get Gina into the pawn shop where the murder occurs. And as if Gina being arrested for murder wasn't bad enough, Herlock is shot and hospitalized the same night, and Susato has to leave for Japan before the trial, so Iris takes her place as your assistant. Everything's just going right in his world.
This is fine.
Since this is the final chapter, it's also the longest one. However, there is a lot of wasted time investigating things that don't matter and discussing things that are meaningless to the trial. On one hand, you do get the answers to what really happened the night McGilded was accused of murder and how it ties into this case.
Oh, I'm ever so sorry. How sloppy of me not to finish the job.
But on the other hand, this chapter asks a bunch of new questions that it just doesn't answer. I'm not a fan of such obvious sequel baiting, but it's not a big deal this time since I can just start up the sequel right away, which I haven't played yet, by the way, and still need more time to get to that. The Great Ace Attorney Adventures was a large improvement on the established Ace Attorney formula. The new mechanics of Herlock's deductions and the jury were fun additions that spiced things up, although they did get annoying at times. Ryunosuke, Susato, and Gina are 3 of the best characters in this whole franchise, however, Herlock and Iris are hit and miss at best. The story was mostly interesting, and the interactions between the characters and how they grew over the course of the game was fun to see. And for as much as I criticize some of the smaller parts of this game, like going off on tangents that don't really matter, it's still mostly overshadowed by the fun that comes with being in the courtroom in these games, which is always done really well. 8 out of 10. A great game with a few slow points, but still definitely worth a shot. And since I still need more time to finish The Great Ace Attorney 2, next time we return to Scott Cawthon's Mind Palace and descend further into this mad, cold world to get ourselves some answers. I hope to see you there.
Continue?